if you've got this far with me, it means that we're on project number 8. We hit it together, which I think is incredible that you've got this far. Let me show you what is our goal for today. Let me just refresh this page here. And you can see that the text is growing, is expanding letter by letter, word by word, looking like the effect of typing on the typewriter machine. And that's part 1. Part 1 we are going to do together. Part 2, again, we are going to do it together. It's going to be building on what we've already got. So this text here expanding, and there will be a effect of a cursor at the end. And the third part is going to be for you, and I have to warn you right away, it's going to be a difficult one. It's going to be really difficult, and I'm not just saying, it's actually going to be very difficult. But we need to accept this challenge in order to become a great developer. In this project, we are not introducing new concepts. We are utilizing what we already know. So the knowledge that we already acquired, implementing to solve new issues. And it's surprisingly difficult because so many times you can see the solution after you kind of like first get to know the new concept, and you have this task handed over and you think it's difficult, but then you see the solution and you think, okay, that wasn't that difficult after all. I could do it. And then you're given a kind of different task and you're supposed to use the same tools, and it turns out it's difficult again. So today we are learning how to think like a programmer. Right. Let's focus on index.html for a second. We have a div element in the body tag with a span. Only one span at the moment, but we are going to add another one in the part 2. That's why I have given it a class of text, so that we can navigate more easily later on. And it's currently empty, but our JS function that we are going to write is going to be dynamically injecting the text from here into the span here. And the styles, we have family. Feel free to change it and set it to something more resembling the typewriting effect. Max width to 80%, which is kind of like limiting the space here, so we have extra space on the left hand side and on the right hand side here. Margins, font size 20 pixels, and letter spacing again to make a little bit more credible that it's a typewriter. Cool. And for the main JS, as per usual, clean, because we are starting from 0. This is the final project, and this tab here represents what we have so far. Just nothing. First thing, we are going to access our span and store it in a span text. SPN text variable by document, a query selector, and what did I say? What was the class called? Text? Yes, text. So we are going to store our span in this variable here, and we are going to create another const called text, which is going to be the actual text. I'm going to go back to index.html. By lorem, I'm going to copy this and paste it here as a string. So I'm going to wrap it in quotation marks. And a quick note here, every element in a string has its position. So it has its own index starting from 0. So if you ever want to get a specific element, you could use an array notation, which is the square brackets. And it's going to be important for us later on, or actually in just a minute, when we are going to build this function to add another letter. In order to do it, we are going to use a setInterval. The first parameter for setInterval is this function that is calling a method every like a minute, every 10 seconds, every second. And as the first parameter, we are passing a function. So what is supposed to happen? I'm going to name our function addLetter. Again, we are not calling it here, it's just a reference. And as a second parameter, it's going to receive time. I'm going to put down 50, which is 50 milliseconds. And 1 second is 1000 milliseconds. So this is just a fraction of a second. Means that per second, we are going to add 20 letters. Cool. Now, I'm going to create a function expression, addLetter, use an arrow function here, and console log hi, just to make sure it works fine. And so we have those many highs printed in the console, and you know that setInterval will run for the whole eternity. In other words, it's going to run as long as the program runs. And there are occasions when we don't need it anymore. And in order to kind of stop from being executed every 15 milliseconds, we need to access its index. And this is the one new thing that is going to be introduced in this class, is that every setInterval has its own index. So it doesn't matter if you're going to use it or not, it's automatically kind of given to every setInterval. setInterval does something that we want, and we are very clear about this and very specific. But every setInterval, also regardless of what we do, returns a specific index for its own set. Like every setInterval has its own index, and it's going to be very crucial because this index is going to help us to stop setInterval from running. I'm going to show you. I'm going to make a little demonstration. I'm just going to comment this out and save it. Whoops, no, I didn't want to do this. I wanted to save it now. Right. I'm going to create a const called index1 and create a setInterval that is not going to do anything. It's just for us to show you that every setInterval has its own index. So I'm going to create 2 of those, and I'm gonna console log the value of the index. Index 1 and index 2. Cool. We're gonna save it, and we see 2 digits, 2 numbers in the console. The first one is representing the value stored under index 1, and the second one, 3, is the value stored under index 2. Because every time a function returns a value, we can assign this value to whatever is on the left hand side. So if we create a variable, and here we're gonna set interval something, we don't need to specify, but by default it's gonna return this own specific index, and this index is gonna be stored here. And it's important, and you will see in just a second why. I'm gonna comment this out, and let's say I'm gonna create a let number, give it a value of 0 for now. And now I'm gonna say that if my number equals 200, then I want to clear interval. And in the parentheses, I'm specifying which interval I want to clear. So I'm gonna now like access the index for our set interval that we're gonna use for our task. This is one that is triggering add letter. I'm gonna create another const and call it index typing. And this specific index that is storing the index for this interval here, I'm gonna pass here. And the last thing I have to do in order for it to work, I need to make sure that on every iteration, so every 50 milliseconds, our number is incremented. Save it and comment this, and there we go. As soon as it hits 200, it should stop. So let's wait and let's see. Go. So it ran 200 times. It hit the number 200. This condition then was true, and it cleared our interval. Cool. So for now, I'm gonna comment this out so it doesn't distract you from listening to me. Save it, and let's go back to our actual task at hand. We need to make sure that we are injecting this text into our span text here, but we need to do it letter by letter. So the first thing we need to do is to say span text, access its text content property, and we want to be able to add letter by letter. And as I said, every character in a string can be accessed by the array notation. So what we're gonna do instead of a number, we're gonna create a different variable. We want to be able to access every specific index of our string. So we are going to call it index text. Again, starting from 0. And this is what we are going to inject our text content in our span. So plus equals, because we want to build on top of what there is, like adding an extra character every time. And we are going to do text, because we want to work on text using the array notation, so the square bracket, and we want to be able to access every index. So instead of number, we're going to increment the index. So here we are adding to the text content letter by letter by specifying that we are accessing every index, and this index starting from 0, we want to increment on every iteration. And we do not want to have this condition like here. What we want to happen is that we want index text to run, well, okay, this is perfect because you can see what happened if we didn't clear the interval. It is triggering the add letter every 50 milliseconds, and it does it indefinitely. So our text stopped here with Fujiat in question mark here, but our function was running for eternity, and because it couldn't find any more text, it was printing undefined, undefined, undefined. So we need to change this condition here, and we need to make sure that we are stopping the set interval from adding another letter as soon as it hits the end here. And we need to make sure it's universal, so as it could be like 3 times longer and it still has to work exactly the same. So again, we are accessing text and we are accessing its length, meaning that as soon as the index is equal to the end of text, we want to clear. Let's save it. Let's see if it's going to stop at the end of the text. It stopped right there because as soon as it hit the end, we cleared the interval accessing its index. And we can do a double check, and it's universal by changing the text slightly and seeing if it's going to stop again at the end. It's going. And we have that at the end because this is the end. Cool. I invite you to the second part where we're gonna add this extra feature of the cursor. The same like here, the same one that is happening here, we are going to do it in our program. Cool. The part 2 of our project, and as I said, we are going to build on top of what we already have, and we are just going to add one mini extra feature, which is this flickering pipe at the end, which is actually the cursor. The same thing is happening in our IDE. You can see that it's flickering, coming up, and disappearing, coming up, disappearing. Let me just refresh this. So you can see that the pipe is always in front of the last letter, and at the very end, it just stays there and it continues to flicker. So it shows and it disappears one by one. As I said, there is going to be another span in our index.html, and so we are going to create it with the help of our emmet span, the class of cursor, and here we are going to place our pipe. We're going back to our actual task, and you will see that the pipe is now visible, but when it stops, it's gonna be right there in your face, but not flickering. So we need to add this effect, and we are going to use styles in a way, because we are going to access the cursor class and set the opacity. At first we're gonna set it to 0 here, and then with the help of JS, we're gonna be injecting the class of active, which is gonna make the cursor visible, and then remove it. So it's gonna be like coming up, coming down. But it's no problem having more classes, as you remember, active, and it's not gonna be hard coded in here, but like depending on our function, it's gonna give and then take it back, and then give again and then take it back. Cool. So we're gonna create a class called active, and here the opacity is gonna be set to 1. So here currently invisible cursor, and once it's gonna be given the class of active, opacity set to 1 means that it's gonna be visible. And to not make it this transition like too rapid, we are going to set the transition time to 0.2 second. Cool. Save it to make it like easier on the eyes and more pleasing. Cool. Let's go back to main.js, and here again we are going to set an interval that is going to do this cursor animation for us, but we don't need to assign it to any index because we want the effect to stay there. We want the pipe to be flickering at the end forever, so we don't want it to kind of like stop working. So let's create another setInterval here. Let's call it cursor animation, and let's make sure it's called every 400 milliseconds, so almost half a second we are going to call our function. Const cursor animation. Again, an arrow function. And what do we need for the cursor animation to actually do? We need to toggle this class of active, but we need to toggle this class of active on a span. So first of all, we need to select our span. We're going to call it SPN cursor. So name will actually explain what it is. And again, document, query selector, and here was a class of cursor. Now we have that cursor stored in a variable. We can actually toggle the class. So here inside, I'm going to access span cursor, the class list, and then the toggle method. Toggle method is going to toggle our active class that is already defined in CSS. Let's see if this actually works. And it's toggling the class at the end. So you can see that the nice effect of coming out and then disappearing has been added. It took us just a minute to do it. So a very simple, very pleasing task. Let's just refactor the code slightly so we can get rid of the comments. We don't need them. We can take this time out from here. I don't mean that we have to, because we have time here and time here, but let's say we wanted to kind of modify something to make it more optimized. 40, we can create some parameters on top, and here is going to be just an implementation. And let's say we don't want to later on change the cursor animation, and let's say that we only wanted to play with the set interval, meaning that here we have the implementation for everything, which is universal. It doesn't matter how long is the text or how short, it's always going to work the same. The cursor is going to work the same, and we can play with some variables here if we wanted. Well, actually, I'm going to leave it for the third part because I would say too much if I told you already. I'm just going to add one more thing, that here we have this effect of slowly there's this moment of when the cursor completely disappears and it's just kind of hesitating for a second. And it's because here we have 0.2 seconds and here we have 400. We could change it to 200 in here as well and make it equal to this transition time, and the effect would be slightly different. Oh, the text is very long, so we have to wait for quite a while. Then you see that it's flickering very quickly, because this time here is the same as the transition from here. If we wanted to have this effect of slowly going down, disappearing for a second and then coming up, we need to make sure this is slightly different. So let's leave 400. Cool. The third one is for you. As I said, it's going to be a very difficult one. And good luck. Finally, the time has come for the super difficult task. I wonder if you find it very difficult. I kind of think that you will. And if you don't manage to get it right, do not feel guilty. I think it is really difficult at this point. At this point of your career, I'm going to refresh this page just so you can see what we are dealing with. Little stranger, a little pause, another string coming up. How you doing? Again, a little pause, and I'll leave retrograde. So basically, first thing I'm going to show you is index.html. Pretty much nothing is changed here, just the font size slightly bigger so that we can see it better. And here exactly the same as we had two spans, one span for the text and the second span for the cursor. We are not supposed to be touching this, not supposed to be changing any of these unless you feel like you wanted to, I don't know, have it a little different. But our task here is to use a setTimeout in place of setInterval. So here we are calling our addLetter function. It's the first call out, and the implementation should come right here inside the curly braces. I would strongly advise that you use setTimeout. You feel brave, go on and try the setInterval. I think the setTimeout would work a little better here. It's good because we have to create some conditions, and in setTimeout, setInterval will be executed every 400 milliseconds, and setTimeout is different in this, that it's only called once. The callback function is called once after the specified time, and the thing will happen, and you can use as many setTimeouts as you want. That's my mini hint for you. If you can see, we now have not one long string but an array of texts, of strings. So this is the difficulty. We have to get access to every specific string one by one, and inside the string and inside every specific element. And one thing that we didn't go through, I know that previously we used the setInterval and you will feel more confident using the setInterval, but I really want you to practice the setTimeout this time. And one thing that we need for this task in order to get it, if you have a string inside an array and you want to access a specific index of a character in that string, first of all, we need to specify, again, with the array notation, because this is an actual array. Here we're specifying the index. So index of the element. We have 3 elements. This is index 0, this is index 1, and this is under index 2. So if we do index 0 here, and then let's say we want to access E letter from our first text, we would do another set of square brackets and then say 0, 1. That would equal to this specific index here. So by the first notation, you are getting inside the element of an array, and by doing the second set of square brackets, you are specifying at what index you're interested in that specified element. So if you wanted to get, let's say, this D from here, you would do index 0, 1, 2 and 0 here. That would get you that is letter T. Cool. Leave this unchanged. This is supposed to just stay the same. Add letter as the first callout of this function, and including the body of that function here. Bear in mind that the task is very difficult, so getting any part of it right will be great. And also that every time there is a new word coming up or a new string, there is a little pause at the end and at the beginning. So it doesn't go like the machine, like one by one, but it actually stops. There's a mini pause and then it goes on printing out another word. Oh, I leave it with this, and I wish you good luck, and do not get discouraged by this one. This is just to practice and to kind of like exercise our brain even more. Hi, so I hope that you're not feeling too tired, but actually feel the opposite, that you feel energized and ready to compare our solutions. So let's get started. What we have to do here. So first of all, we have this text here. It's an array of strings, and we need to be able to get an index of every element, so text 1, text 2, and text 3. But we also need to be able to get inside our strings and to be able to access the index of every element of the string. So we are going to create a variable for index indicating index of a character in a string. I'm going to set it to 0, and another one active text, which is going to be an index for every element. So text 1, text 2, and text 3. Also set it to 0 at the beginning. And now we have to implement our function. So what we need, again, we need this span text. It's text content property, and we are going to inject our words and letters inside that span here. So we're going to do text, and as I said, we are going to need 2 sets of square brackets. The first one is going to receive an index for every specific element of an array, so active text, and the second one is for index of every single letter inside our string. So this is going to be a variable active letter. We're going to do it step by step. So first thing we would want to do is to increment an index of active letter. That's what we are going to do. And the last thing we need to do is to set timeout. So as you see, we've got this first calling of the function here, add letter. It's going to go to this add letter here, read everything, and then the set timeout is going to be like kind of like the set interval, but inside the function, happening when we want it to happen. And you probably can do it with the set interval, or maybe you've done it with set interval, and that's also okay, but I wanted to present a different solution. So set timeout, which I think is easier in this particular case. And here again, we're gonna call the same function, add letter, and let's say every 200 milliseconds. Save it. Then you see that the first word has been printed out. Then there is undefined, undefined, and it's because we are only incrementing the index for this first element here, but later on it doesn't go on to read the second string and the third string, but it's actually incrementing indefinitely, trying to read what's after text 1 as if there were more characters here, but there aren't any, and hence we are getting this undefined here. So what we need to do now is to make sure that as soon as the index is reaching the end here, so it reaches the end of that first element, well, for now it's just gonna stop the function. So if active letter equals txt, because this is our array, and then active text here, so this is going to be the first, this index 0 at the moment, and length property. And all I wanted to do for now is to return. We don't actually have to place anything after the return. If you put a keyword return, it's just going to stop the function and it's not going to go any further. So it's not going to go to this set timeout here. It's just going to stop. I'm going to save it. we've got text 1, and that's great because it means it's working. We don't want our function to stop right there. We want it to continue executing. So the next thing we want to do is to make sure that after reading the first element here, it goes on to reading the next element. And in order to do that, we need to now increment our active text. I'm going to do active text plus plus as the incrementation. Hit save. And the result is very similar to what we had before, but it's caused by a different issue. So we have incremented the text, this index for the text. So it went on to read text 2, but active letter, which started from 0, has been incrementing throughout. So after it had 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then it's set to 5, but there is nothing on position of 5. So it cannot read anything here. It has to start over from 0. So that to be able to read that second string, it has to start again from 0. And to do that, we just need to reset active letter and set it to 0. Now we have text 1, text 2, and text 3. And it would be also very beautiful if it wasn't for this one thing here in red. It says cannot read properties of undefined reading 0. So we have incremented every letter. We know now that we need to, after we finish reading the first text, it has to go on and read the second element because we are incrementing the active text here. But the program doesn't know how many elements we have in our array. So after reading text 3, it wants to go on and read the rest of the elements. So it cannot read what's at the position of index 0 because there is nothing. Nothing is there, hence it cannot read its property. So what we need to do now, we need another condition for this condition will inform the program that the array has finished and there are no more elements. So we have to refer to active text equals text length. So the length of our array. And then stop right there. Go text 1, text 2, and text 3. So it's printing out all 3 words letter by letter, and we have no error thrown in here in the console, so it means that we are going in the right direction. It's just that we never wanted these texts to be clustered together, stringed together. We wanted to have text 1 displayed first, then an empty screen, clean window, then text 2 displayed, and the same clean, and text 3. So we need to reset our span text content and set it to an empty string. In this way, after reading each text or displaying it, it cleans the screen for a moment and goes on. And that would be great. However, we had this one point on the list that says delay writing each word. And this is where things get a little messy, a little complicated, because I'm thinking the best way to achieve this is to use another setTimeout, which is going to delay the action of displaying subsequent words. So after this here, I'm going to do I'm gonna do, actually I'm gonna do it here, and I'm gonna do return, because after here we can just finish our function, we can end our function. So I'm just gonna write it first, and then we'll have a moment to focus on it. Because set timeout, and in here an anonymous function, because we don't need to name it anymore. And here after a comma we need the time of dilation, which is going to be 200 milliseconds or 2 seconds. And I've pasted in the wrong place, so this we need actually here, and what is left here we need to be inside our set timeout, removing it from here. Save it. Got text 1. Right, I have only one text here, because what we need to do, as well as resetting the active letter to 0 and cleaning the span to nothing, we need to also call add letter one more time. But now it's waiting. There's 2 seconds after printing out each word, and ta-da! Cool. But what we needed as well as the pause between, we wanted for every word to kind of like wait a little bit before printing out. So in order to do this, we will change active letter to, let's say, -40, and we will need another condition. So I'm gonna place it in here. If active letter is bigger or equal to 0, then, only then, when you reach 0, start executing our function. And save it, let's watch. Nothing is happening again. Oh, it's happening, it's just taking so long, because maybe 40 is too long. Let's do 15. Save it. You can see that the cursor is right there, but it's waiting this time before it's displaying the string. And that's because we are setting, well, first of all, we're calling the add letter first here, and it's going inside the function here, and it says active letter has to be bigger or equal to 0, and it starts at -15, so it has to wait until it's going to display anything to the screen. It's incrementing all the time, like because of the set timeout here. So every 200 milliseconds it's incrementing, but it's not allowed to display anything just yet. And only when it reaches the 0, this from here, this incrementation from here, then it's allowed to add and inject the text and go on to read all the other conditions. Because if this condition is not met, all the others are not met either. So it goes on incrementing the active letter. Finally it reaches 0, and it goes on to do what we just programmed it to do. I know it's a little complex with those 2 set timeouts inside one function, and it's very difficult to understand for anyone at the beginning. It just requires some sitting down, analyzing the code. Sometimes you have to, the best way, it's kind of boring to hear, but to debug. And what does it even mean to debug? The best way to learn is to place many console logs so to know what happens when and to really understand what has been done here step by step. Because me explaining it to you, you feel like, okay, I get it. But then if you try getting this right by yourself without anything, if you get like an empty clean page, and it's very difficult to remember unless you actually understand the mechanism of what happened here and here. The first condition is to delay the displaying of any text. So because we put -15 here, it's going to wait, increment the active letter, but it's not going to inject anything directly here. And it's going to increment every 200 milliseconds. It's going to reach 0 eventually. And then it's going to start displaying the text from here. It's going to start at index 0. So it's going to start with T from here. And it's going to go on because we're only incrementing the active letter, the index of the first element. It's going to go on, display text 1. Then if active letter is equal to the length of the first element, then we are increasing the index number for the element. So it's going on to read this one then. And again, we have this condition to make sure that it stops when it reaches the end of an array, and it has to be there. And then we have this another setTimeout where we make sure that the active letter is always reset to 0, so it always starts from 0. We make sure there's this mini break between when it starts. It's starting from 0 and it's starting from a clean browser window. And we have to make sure that every time after this break, we are executing this function add letter. Cool. Take your time, analyze it, and do not get discouraged because these are not easy things. And it's difficult to explain if you do not analyze it first. So try to get really inside there and do many console logs. And I'm gonna see you at project 9. Thanks.